Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about the Doctor Who episode, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. Now this was a pretty fun episode, but didn't have much going on in the way of drama. But that's actually not really a problem. Let me explain to you why I feel that way. One of the people I follow on Twitter is a fellow by the name of Dan Slott. He's a writer for Marvel Comics, done quite a bit of work for them, but he's actually best known these days as being one of the writers on Spider-Man. Now, Dan is also a big Doctor Who fan, and if you follow his Twitter feed, every time a new Doctor Who episode comes out, he always has plenty to say about it. And one of his major comments I saw about this episode was it wasn't, he rattled off the names of a few of the more dramatic episodes of Doctor Who of late, like The Doctor's Wife and all that. And he said, this episode doesn't really have to be, this isn't one of those episodes, and it doesn't have to be. And Dan's making a really nice point here, that while the really dramatic episodes of Doctor Who are often great, I mean, seriously, that's some primo TV. Sometimes it's okay to just step back and tell a story that's meant to be fun and even a little silly. Because, well, look at this. We're watching a show called Doctor Who about an alien who travels around space and time in a ship shaped like a 1960s British police box, and whose greatest enemy is a race of murderous, genocidal salt and pepper shakers. So I think it is not unreasonable to say that a little silliness is just inherent in Doctor Who. And there's nothing wrong with a little silliness. The Doctor, the fourth Doctor, I should say, even once said, I might not be saying this the word for word, but he said, "What's the point of growing up if you can't be childish once in a while?" Well, I think that's very much a case of what's going on here. But anyway, I definitely have a lot to say about how what we see here ties into some of the past episodes, so let's get right into it. And in terms of past episodes, of course, we're seeing the Silurians yet again. It looks like those guys have proven to be big hits with the fans. Of course, they look rather different than the ones that we saw way back in the old episodes from the 70s, but hey, makeup technology has come a long way. Certainly would be wise for the Doctor Who guys to take advantage of that. And of course, this episode is certainly in some ways very reminiscent of the Jon Pertwee episode, Invasion of the Dinosaurs. And if you've ever seen that, it's quite the prime example of what sort of budget Doctor Who was operating under back in the 70s. It's not a bad episode, but the dinosaur effects are very reminiscent of the old 80s American TV show Land of the Lost. Pardon me. So anyway, there was that, and as another fan pointed this out to me, we see again that the Doctor has a fondness for the vegetarian dinosaurs. We saw Matt Smith just really cooing over that Triceratops, and Jon Pertwee did something similar to a herbivorous dinosaur back in that episode. And speaking of shout-outs to the older episodes, the Doctor even mentioned Transmat. Dude, Transmat, that's all the way back to, what, the Patrick Troughton era? In fact, I'm pretty sure the first time we heard about that was the episode where they introduced one of my, favorite old-timey companions, Zoe. I freaking love Zoe. She's awesome. And they mentioned Transmat, or TMAT as they called it. So, again, really, really cool little shout-out to the old-school Doctor Who fans. And hey, fun fact, Zoe's actress, Wendy Padbury, after she got out of Doctor Who, ended up becoming a theatrical agent who discovered Matt Smith. Seriously, I'm telling you the truth. That's what happened. I mean, ain't life full of crazy coincidences? But anyway, another thing, going back to nodding as a nod to the older shows. Well, actually, I wouldn't say it's really a nod to the older shows. It's just a comment the 11th Doctor happened to make that reminded me of something. And it's when he's poking around on the spaceship just after they arrive there. He sees the spider web and remarks that it's very unusual to see spiders in space. Now, I'm assuming that the Doctor is referring to Earth spiders or something like that, because I'm pretty sure the Doctor has fought alien spiders before. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not the greatest expert on the Pertwee era ever, but I have seen my share of episodes from that time, and, hello, Metabelus 3. I mean, wasn't like evil spiders from outer space that caused the third Doctor to get radiation poisoning to such a terrible degree that he regenerated into the fourth Doctor? I mean, the third Doctor died, if I'm remembering correctly, because of alien space spiders. But I might just be taking that comment, that rather offhand comment, a little bit too far. That's better. So, I did enjoy some of the other things that were going on in this episode. First of all, those two crazy low-rent Bioshock-looking robots. From what I found out, apparently those were voiced by some well-known British comedians who've got their own TV show or something. I have no idea who they are. This is just something I happened to come across while doing some reading about this episode. So, in any case, it certainly is nice to see celebrities from that side of the pond popping up on Doctor Who again. It's been a while since we've seen anybody like the ranks of Simon Pegg, but hey, I'm certainly not going to complain. The robots were certainly entertaining, even if, despite being presented as very dangerous, all they seemed to really be able to do is hit targets that were standing very, very close to them and not moving. Also, wouldn't it have taken a really, really, really long time to throw the Silurians out the airlock a handful at a time? I mean, okay, they're robots. It's not like they need to sleep, but still, wouldn't it have been easier just to you know what? Forget it. I'm definitely putting way too much thought into that, and there's a point where you need to stop when it comes to that. So we also, this episode, we certainly did see a very obvious shout out to Jurassic Park, especially with the character of Riddle taking on the Raptors with the help of Amy. Let me see here. So let's kind of get into a little bit more of the character stuff. Let's actually start with Rory's dad, Brian. I wasn't really too thrilled with having him there. I honestly, at the very beginning of the episode, didn't really see a point. I mean, it's like, why is he here? It's not like, Donna's grandpa, who was cool as hell. Brian seemed like a decent enough guy, but it's like, okay, why is he here? And granted, though, at the very end, him joining forces with Rory to pilot the spaceship, I mean, that was really cool. And the scene where he just sort of stops and is dangling his feet out the TARDIS door, eating his lunch, looking down at the world, that was... And there not being any dialogue there. I love that. That's such a human moment, and I think that more than anything really justified his presence there. And if you stop and think about it a moment, this also means this is another member of the Doctor's family. I mean, he is technically the Pond's son-in-law, so this is his grandfather-in-law in a way. So I think that you could look at this as a way of further strengthening the connection between the Doctor and Amy and Rory, his family, because it's very hinted heavily that this is going to be something we're really going to be addressing here. I mean, I don't think I'm going to spoil very much by saying this is our last season for Amy and Rory as companions. And Amy's comment about her wondering if the Doctor is winning them off him, and wondering, am I always going to be the girl who waited? Am I always going to be wondering when or if you're going to pop up again? And if you really stop and think about it, what's going on with the Doctor and the Ponds is very, very unusual. Once a companion leaves the Doctor, generally that's it. I mean, occasionally they can't come back. I mean, certainly Wendy Padbury was one of the companions who came back, if you've seen the 5 Doctors. But for the most part, it's once the Doctor leaves your life, that's it. I mean, it's certainly not as if the Doctor's ever gone back and dropped in. So like, hey Nissa, how you doing? It's been forever. Oh, by the way, I regenerated. I mean, the Doctor doesn't do that, and and I've always kind of wondered a little bit why he doesn't do that, but it really does make sense. The Doctor, of course, can travel in time whenever he wants. So it's really not too unreasonable to think that the Doctor is perfectly aware of just when it is each and every one of his companions is going to die. And can you really blame him for not wanting to go and have to look them in the face knowing, Tegan only has 30 or 40 years more left. Ace is going to die in 50 years or something like that. I mean, if you've ever been around someone who is dying, that in 3 years, 6 months, a month, they're going to be gone. No matter how you feel, in some ways, looking at them and knowing that their time is up, and that while they're gone, you're going to continue on, barring the unforeseen. It's not an easy thing. It really isn't. And I think you'll have to forgive me if I'd really rather not say any more about that than that. But anyway, getting on with the characters, let's talk about Amy and Rory. This episode kind of reminded me of one of the things that I don't like about the 11th Doctor, and that's he seems to like Amy much more than he does Rory. And honestly, I mean, look at the way and this is also true of Brian, he immediately he addresses Brian as a Pond, even though he's not. He's Williams. In fact, Rory was never Rory Pond. Amy, if you paid attention to the last episode, signed her divorce papers Amy Williams. So I'm guessing that just meant that Rory would have been willing to take her name, but Amy decided, nah, we'll just do this the traditional way after all. But anyway, it just sort of seems like the Doctor seems to, I don't know if exactly patronize Rory is the proper word, but it really does seem to me that he doesn't hold Rory in quite as high a regard as he does Amy. And this is actually sort of an interesting thing, because one of the things that we saw when we're looking at the way Riddell and Cleopatra all sort of bounced off Amy as characters, the position of women, the deliberate values dissonance that Riddle brings as being a guy from the early 20th century is very clear. Now, one of the things that people used to accuse the old doctors from the 70s of, Baker and Pertwee, was that they had a kind of a patronizing attitude towards women. This was especially true, I think, during the Pertwee era. But again, this is understandable because Pertwee started up and running in 1970, which is really when the feminist and women's liberation movement really started getting some serious steam, when that stuff started really becoming an issue in society. And so it's not really surprising that that sort of thing would pop up. And if they were to present a character like Sarah Jane and the Doctor is there and he's just like, oh, totally okay with this, well, there's no real conflict there. I mean, it certainly would have been very progressive, but it would have been a little, I don't know, I don't think it really would have been in keeping with what you'd have expected of sort of an older gentleman sort of character like the Doctor. Now, yes, okay, he was an alien and all this other stuff, but he was still kind of that very old-fashioned older guy. I mean, that was what we had seen of the Doctors. They were all older fellas who seemed to have a very old-fashioned view of things. So putting them there and having that sort of conflict with a character like Sarah Jane, I think made sense in terms of storytelling at the time. Now, I know that some modern audiences might look back at that and feel very upset, maybe even offended by that, but it's like somebody once said, the past is a foreign country, they do things differently there. So, and do keep in mind, and I think this really does need to be said, if the writers had really had a major problem with, feminists or really strong female characters, why in the world would they have even created the character of Sarah Jane Smith? They could have just kept Joe Grant around. And let's not forget Liz Shaw. Now, sadly, she didn't last all that long. And it's not because the writers didn't like her. It's just simply she was very bright scientist, so the really scientific academic sorts in the audience could follow what she and the Doctor were talking about. But Joe Blow, nothing beyond a high school education, that was going a little bit over their heads. And I've seen in the interviews with the creators of Doctor Who that this is why they got rid of Liz. Not because they didn't like her, it's like, okay, we need somebody who's a little bit more of an everyman here. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that after all these years, it's actually in a way to me come a little bit full circle where the Doctor is now somewhat patronizing towards his male companions. I mean, look at the way the Doctor treated Rose and Martha and Amy and River, of course, and then compare it to the way he treats Rory and the way he treated Mickey. I mean, really, the Doctor really seemed to enjoy busting Mickey's chops. And for an average guy caught up in everything that he was, I think Mickey really held up remarkably well. And by the end of it all, Mickey had become a pretty badass dude. I mean, I love Mickey. He's a cool dude. Anyway, folks, you can make your own judgments about that, but it is something that occurred to me while I was watching this episode. So I throw that out there for your consideration. Another thing I wanted to talk about. No, actually, I'll get to that in a minute. Let's finish talking about the characters. The characters of Nefertiti and Riddle. I didn't really have very much to say about them. I've already sort of addressed Riddle's that Riddle is there basically to show values dissonance. Nefertiti, again, she's there to present sort of an alternate view. And just because it's funny to see women take an interest in the Doctor and the way he sort of freaks out a little bit whenever that happens, I find that aspect of the Doctor to genuinely be hilarious. I mean, one of my all-time favorite episodes of New Who, even though it's a slightly different than what I was just talking about, was the moment where stretchy rubber face woman, whatever the hell her name is, takes over Rose's body and kisses the Doctor, and the Doctor like, and then as soon as Rose is away, she's just like, "Yep, still got it." I swear that is still to this day one of my all-time favorite moments of Doctor Who. But anyway, the only real problem I have with the character of Nefertiti is simply, I don't think it's really common knowledge that Nefertiti at one point just flat out vanishes from history. She was just chugging along and then suddenly she's gone, and to this day nobody knows exactly what happened to her. Now, most likely, as I understand the way these sort of things worked in ancient Egypt, she got on the wrong side of the king and he just ordered all record of her destroyed. I mean, that would be the most simple explanation. But this is Doctor Who, so of course we can say she ultimately decided to she traveled in time and ended up hooking up with some crazy ass big game hunter from the early 20th century. I mean, hey, why not, right? So it's just, I don't think that's really something that is common knowledge among people. So I think a lot of people out there are probably going to be going like, wait a minute, she's like the Queen of Egypt. Shouldn't she have to go back to ancient Egypt or something? Didn't the Doctor just like horribly screw up Earth history? So I think maybe just some kind of a comment from Amy or somebody like that would have been really nice to make sure that we all were on the same page. Now, as for Solomon, I don't really have a whole lot to say about him. He's really pretty much a disposable one-shot villain. I was, like a lot of you I'm sure, really creeped out by the way he not so subtly implied that he was going to rape Nefertiti. I mean, seriously, Doctor Who, you have to remember, is in the UK considered family TV. This is something that parents and kids watch together. It's a real, British family tradition kind of thing. So allusions to rape, especially pretty hardcore ones, like what Solomon was throwing out there. I know I'm not the only one who's surprised that they did that. Excuse me a sec. Now here is I come to another one of my kind of gripes about this issue. It's the way they got rid of Solomon. Now we know that the Doctor can be pretty ruthless at times, especially if you have gone to the point where the Doctor is convinced that you are an irredeemable person. If that is the case, then the Doctor will not have a problem either destroying you or, like what was it, the Family of Evil or whatever the hell that David Tennant episode, Family of Blood, I think it was that episode, or doing something really unholy, horrible to you that you would probably make you wish you were dead. So I don't certainly think it's out of character for the Doctor to have left Solomon to his death, and that whole thing, like, here's your bounty, enjoy it, and blah blah blah. I think that was a very nice Doctor Who moment. It was very well written. Honestly, my only real gripe with this scene is it just feels so much like it was out of, they basically swiping the Ra's al Ghul scene from the end of Batman Begins. Doctor Who and Batman. Boy, there's actually there's a fanfic that I'm sure has probably been done more than once at this point. So let me see here. Yeah, that covers most of what I wanted to say. But before we wrap this up, let's talk about the little bit of very slightly ominous foreshadowing that I think we saw, where Amy was talking about, where the Doctor said to Amy that he'd be with her till the end. And like I said, this really makes me think that the Doctor is very aware of just when it is that his companions die. I mean, really, he cares about them, so how could he not want to know what happens to them after they leave? And the thing with Amy, though, is Amy's a member of his family. She is someone who he has had this enormous influence on from her childhood. So, unlike any of his other companions, Amy's not somebody he can just, pop off and leave and never see again and just find out her ultimate fate with a Google search or whatever the heck he's got on the TARDIS that lets him do stuff like that. Amy is the girl who waited. She is someone who dedicated such an enormous part of her life to him. So I can't help but wonder if, when this is all over, it's not going to end with some scene with like Amy in an old folks somewhere, senile out of her mind, and the Doctor, being there holding her hand as the end comes. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. That's just what comes to my mind. Hey, you know what? What do you guys think? Let me know. Anyway, with that said, folks, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.